percents greater than 100 and less than 1. Topic 14-3, Envision Math 6. How can you express percents greater than 100? Remember that a percent is a special kind of ratio in which the first number is always compared to 100. Here is an example of a percentage greater than 100. Jan and Kim built model cars for a science project. Kim's car traveled 140% as far as Jan's car. How can you write 140% as a fraction and as a decimal? First, recognize that the distance Jan's car traveled is our whole, or 100%. So 100% is the length of Jan's car. Since Kim's car went farther, it is more than 100%. So we're going to use our conversion strategies to make 100% a fraction and a decimal. We'll start with 140 over 100, since percents are always out of 100, and convert it to a fraction. I like to first change it to a mixed number, because I can take 100 out of that 140 and give me 1 and 40 hundredths. Then I'm going to divide by 10 to reduce it, which gives me 1 and 4 tenths. I think I can reduce it even further, so I'm going to divide by 2, which gives me my final answer of 1 and 2 fifths. Now to change it to a decimal, I am first going to change it to a mixed number again. Now I can simply use my knowledge of place value and say, okay, that is 1 whole and 40 in 100ths, so I would put 40 ending in the hundredths place, and that gives my decimal answer 1.4. Now here's an example of a percent less than 1. So what if we have actually 1/2%? How would that look as a fraction and a decimal? When we're talking 1/2%, we're talking about this whole here, that's 100, and we're talking about half of one of those. So that's what this little picture is showing. Okay, first off, we know that 1/2% equals 0.5% because 1/2 equals 0.5. So knowing this is a percentage, that's going to give us 0.5 over 100, and we are going to multiply the numerator and denominator by 10, so that our decimal actually moves one place to the right on both numerator and denominator, which will give us 5 over 1,000. What we're trying to do here is remove the decimal from the fraction. Now we need to reduce the fraction, so I am actually going to divide numerator and denominator by 5, which will give me 1 over 200, and that becomes my final fraction. Now we're going to look at the decimal equivalent. Again, we know that 1/2% is 0.5% because 1/2 equals 0.5. Since percentages are out of 100, that gives us 0.5 out of 100. I want to get rid of that decimal, so I'm going to multiply numerator and denominator by 10. That is going to give me 5 over 1,000. Now to convert it to a decimal, it's very simple from here. All I have to do is use my knowledge of the place value and say, okay, that is a 5 in the thousandths place, so I'm going to count and say, here's the tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So there is my 0.5% as a decimal. Now let's look at another example of both. Let's start with percents greater than 100. We will start with 150%. That's going to give us 150 over 100. When I change it to a mixed number, it's going to give me 1 and 50 over 100. I will reduce that by dividing both the numerator and the denominator by 50, which is going to give me 1 and 1/2. Now for the decimal equivalent, again, I start with 150 over 100 because we know percents are always out of 100. I like to change it to a mixed number, so I will get 1 and 50 over 100. Now, using my knowledge of place value, I'm going to say, okay, that is 1 whole, and then 50 in the hundredths place value. Now, for the percentage less than 1, it's got 0.3% here, which would be the same as 0.3%. So that means I'm going to have 0.3 over 100. I want to get rid of the decimal, so I'm going to multiply numerator and denominator by 10, which is going to move my decimal 1 place to the right. So that will give me 3 over 1,000. And since 3 is a prime number, it cannot be reduced any further, so it will just be 3 1,000ths. To change to a decimal, again, I'm starting with 0.3% because that is what 3/10 is, which will give me 0.3 over 100. Again, I want to multiply that by 10 to get rid of the decimal, which gives me 3 1,000ths. Then I simply use my knowledge of place value and say, okay, I need a 3 in the 1,000ths place, so it will be tenths, hundredths. There's my thousandths, 0.003. Now you try. There are 2 percentages, one more than 100 and one less than 1, for you to convert. And then we will discuss the answers to the 3 questions below. Go ahead and pause the video, and when you hit play again, the answers will appear. Okay, 325% as a fraction. It gives us 325 over 100. I will change it to a mixed number to give me 3 and 25 100ths. Then I will divide numerator and denominator by 25 to give me 3 and 1/4. That is my final fraction. For the decimal, I recognize that 3 and 25 hundredths, using my knowledge of place value, is 3.25 because the 5 is in that hundredths position. For the percentage less than 100, 0.2% is 0.2 over 100. If I would like to multiply both the numerator and denominator by 10, that will move my place value 1 to the right, and I will end up with 2 over 1,000. Since they're both even numbers, I should be able to divide numerator and denominator by 2, which will give me 1/500ths as my final fraction. For the decimal version, that 0.2 over 100 ends up being 2 1,000ths. Using my knowledge of place value, I go tenths, hundredths, and 2 in the 1,000ths place. Now look at the 3 questions. So why is 140% greater than 1? Explain the difference between a half and a half of a percent, and why is 0.5 over 100 multiplied by 10? Again, pause the video, and when you hit play, the answers will appear. For question number 1, 140% is greater because 100% is that 1 whole, and we have 40% more than that. The difference between a half and a half of a percent, well, 1/2 is 0.5. But a half of a percent is actually 0.5 over 100 because it's out of 100. So when we multiply it by 10, we get 5 1,000ths. Now when we divide it by 5, we actually get 1 over 200. And the interesting thing you will notice about this is that we've got those 2 extra zeros there in the denominator, which really tells us that it's the 2 extra zeros from a half of a percent. Okay, they translate right there. So instead of just being 1/2, it's 1 over 200. And last, we multiply the 0.5 over 100 by 10 to eliminate the decimal in the fraction. What we are trying to do is have a fraction that does not have a decimal in the numerator. All right, go ahead and do your quick check and see how well you understood today's lesson.